Why do some nations thrive while others languish in poverty? A global economics classic, Why Nations Fail, The Origins of Power, Prosperity, and Poverty, with over 1 million copies sold and translated into more than 40 languages, reveals the secrets behind national success and failure. Written by MIT economist Daron Acemoglu and Harvard political scientist James A. Robinson, the 2020 for Nobel Prize winners in economics, this book is a game changer. Through the histories and realities of 15 countries, they uncover a surprising truth: a nation's fate hinges not on geography, resources, or culture, but on its institutions. What's the story behind this? Let's dive into the book to explore the deep logic of national success and find the key to changing destinies. 1. History's lens: the decisive power of institutions. To understand why nations fail, consider this. Why did Britain spark the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century while China missed its chance? The authors argue that institutions are the core determinant of a nation's fate. Institutions come into types: inclusive and extractive. Inclusive institutions foster innovation, protect property rights, and promote fair competition, like Britain's parliamentary system and patent laws. Extractive institutions concentrate power, plunder resources, and stifle innovation, like the plantation economies set up by Spanish colonizers in Latin America. The choice of institutions shapes a nation's trajectory of success or failure. Take Britain. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 was a turning point. It overthrew absolute monarchy, established parliamentary sovereignty, and curbed the king's arbitrary taxation powers. Ordinary people gained economic freedom, enabling inventors like James Watt to develop the steam engine, sparking the Industrial Revolution. In contrast, China's Ming and Qing dynasties enforced isolationist policies that stifled commerce, and the imperial exam system, while selecting talent, trapped elites in Confucian classics, lacking mechanisms to incentivize technological innovation. Through these historical contrasts, the authors show that institutions are not abstract concepts but real forces shaping economic and social destinies. But how do institutions form? They don't appear out of nowhere, they're the result of historical choices. The authors use the critical juncture theory to explain certain historical moments, like revolutions, colonization, or reforms, shape long-term institutional paths. For example, Britain's Glorious Revolution laid the foundation for inclusive institutions, while Spanish colonization in the Americas planted the seeds of extractive systems. This path dependence makes it hard for nations to change their developmental trajectories. Institution formation is also tied to power distribution. In Britain, the struggle between the bourgeoisie and the monarchy led to constitutional reforms, gradually granting ordinary people economic and political rights. In Spanish colonies, colonizers built extractive systems like the encomienda, forcing indigenous labor for short-term gain, which choked long-term development. In these cases, the authors reveal how power distribution shapes institutions and, in turn, national destinies. 2. The geography myth: resources and environmental challenges. Many believe geography determines a nation's fate. Tropical countries lag due to heat and disease. Resource-rich nations should prosper. But the authors argue geography isn't the main driver, institutions are. Take the Democratic Republic of Congo, rich in diamonds and cobalt, yet mired in poverty and conflict. Belgian colonizers built extractive institutions, plundering resources without investing in infrastructure, a pattern continued by post-independence elites who monopolized wealth, leaving ordinary people trapped. This is the resource curse: abundant resources, under extractive institutions, fuel instability. Contrast this with Botswana, another resource-rich African nation, diamonds that achieved stability through inclusive institutions. Botswana's traditional tribal councils Kagatla allowed public participation, and post-independence governments maintained transparent fiscal systems, using diamond revenues for education and infrastructure, not elite pockets. Independence in 1966, Botswana's per capita GDP was just $70. By 2010, it neared $7,000. Through these cases, the authors debunk the myth of geographic determinism, emphasizing institutions' power to overcome geographic disadvantages. Geography isn't irrelevant. Tropical diseases, for instance, make institution building harder. In Africa and Latin America, colonizers often opted for short-term plunder, while in North America and Australia, favorable climates encouraged long-term settlement and inclusive institutions. Yet, the authors stress, geography is just the backdrop. Institutions are the deciding factor. Australia, despite its remote location, thrived through 19th-century land reforms and self-governance, becoming one of the world's richest nations. Geography also affects economics through transport and resource distribution. Britain's rivers and ports boosted trade and industrialization, while landlocked nations like Nepal face development challenges due to poor connectivity. But the authors note that geography's impact depends on institutions turning it into productive potential. Switzerland, a landlocked mountainous country, became an economic powerhouse through inclusive institutions like its banking system and precision manufacturing. This proves again, geography sets the stage, but institutions direct the play. 3. The double-edged sword, inclusive vs. extractive institutions. How do institutions drive economic growth? The authors highlight a core mechanism: incentives and opportunities. Inclusive institutions protect property rights, encourage innovation, and provide fair opportunities, unleashing individual creativity. Take Silicon Valley. Its global innovation hub status relies on patent protections, venture capital, and open immigration policies. In the 1980s, a young Steve Jobs built Apple, backed by a U.S. system that supported entrepreneurship, investment, and second chances after failure. Extractive institutions, however, concentrate power among elites, leaving ordinary people without upward mobility. Consider the Korean Peninsula. In 1945, South and North Korea shared similar geography, populations, and cultures, but their institutional choices led to starkly different fates. South Korea's land reforms, open markets, and education investments built inclusive institutions, birthing global giants like Samsung and Hyundai, with per capita GDP soaring from $158 in 1960 to $32,000 in 2020. North Korea's extractive system funneled resources to the Kim family and military, stifling private enterprise, leaving per capita GDP at roughly $1,200 in 2020. This contrast vividly shows how institutions shape economic incentives. Inclusive institutions aren't flawless, and inequality can still grow. In the U.S., the 19th century railway boom, enabled by inclusive institutions, also created robber barons who monopolized markets, sparking public unrest. This shows inclusive institutions need constant tweaking to prevent power concentration. By the late 19th century, U.S. antitrust laws like the Sherman Act curbed big business, rebalancing economic opportunity. Extractive institutions' harm is clearer. In Zimbabwe, post-2000 land reforms under Mugabe seized white-owned farms for political allies, collapsing agriculture and driving inflation to 230% million in 2008. This destroyed the economy and eroded social trust. The authors warn that extractive institutions' short-term gains often lead to long-term collapse. In global competition, inclusive institutions attract investment and technology. Singapore's transparent legal system and efficient government made it an Asian economic hub, while Venezuela's extractive policies drove foreign capital away, tanking its economy. Institutions aren't just key to domestic growth, they're a nation's edge in global markets. 4. Culture's shadow: how beliefs shape institutions. Does culture dictate a nation's fate? Many argue that cultures like Confucianism breed conservatism, hindering progress, while Western individualism drives innovation. The authors counter that culture's impact is overstated. Institutions matter more. Take Japan. In the mid-19th century, it was Confucian, isolationist, and economically backward. But the Meiji Restoration of 1868 introduced inclusive institutions abolishing feudal hierarchies, establishing modern legal systems, and universal education, transforming Japan into an Asian powerhouse by defeating Russia in 1905. This shows culture isn't fixed. Institutional reform can reshape its influence. Culture affects institutions through beliefs about implementation. In Germany, 19th-century Prussian discipline and efficiency supported Bismarck's unification policies, fostering inclusive institutions. In China, late Qing Confucian hierarchies limited reform depth. The Empress Dowager's westernization efforts faltered due to bureaucratic cronyism. This shows culture shapes how institutions are executed. The authors also highlight trust. Economist Robert Putnam's research shows high-trust societies, like those in Scandinavia, build inclusive institutions more easily because people believe rules will be enforced fairly. Sweden's welfare system thrives on high trust, with citizens willingly paying taxes for public services. In low-trust societies like Nigeria, tribal loyalties fuel corruption, diverting public funds and leaving infrastructure lacking. Trust differences partly stem from historical institutional choices, creating cultural path dependence. Yet culture can evolve. South Korea shows how Confucian values under inclusive institutions shifted from hierarchy to innovation. In the 1960s, South Korea's education reforms spread high school access, fostering equality and competition, birthing a modern corporate culture. This proves institutions and culture shape each other, with inclusive systems driving cultural change through education and policy. Social norms also matter. In India, the caste system long limited social mobility, hindering inclusive institutions. But post-1991 market reforms weakened caste barriers, opening tech industry opportunities for young people. This shows institutional reform can break cultural barriers, unlocking social potential. 5. Critical junctures, history's turning points and choices. National destinies often shift at critical junctures. The authors use this concept to explain why some nations break free from stagnation while others spiral into decline. Take China's 1978 reforms, a critical juncture. Deng Xiaoping's rural land reforms gave farmers economic freedom, boosting productivity, while coastal special economic zones attracted foreign investment, laying the groundwork for a market economy. China's per capita GDP jumped from $156 in 1978 to $10,500 in 2020. Contrast this with Venezuela. The 1970s oil boom was a critical juncture, but extractive policies funneled wealth to elites, creating a single resource economy. Post-1998, Chávez's policies deepened extraction, leading to economic collapse and 1.3 million % inflation by 2018. Why do critical junctures matter? They're moments of power shifts or crises that open windows for institutional change. Success depends on leaders' choices and societal responses. Britain's Glorious Revolution succeeded because the rising bourgeoisie and parliament curbed royal power, while France's old regime reforms failed due to aristocratic resistance, sparking the 1789 revolution. These lessons show institutional change needs broad social support, not just elite action. External shocks can also drive critical junctures. Japan's Meiji Restoration was spurred by the 1853 U.S. black ships forcing open trade, breaking isolationist traditions. Japanese elites embraced Western legal and education systems, modernizing rapidly. In contrast, China's Qing dynasty, facing Western pressure after the Opium Wars, attempted reforms like the self-strengthening movement, but faltered due to internal resistance, missing the chance for inclusive institutions. This shows external shocks need internal reform to transform national destinies. Critical junctures also create path dependence. Once institutional choices are made, they're hard to reverse. After the 1991 Soviet collapse, Russia's privatization was hijacked by oligarchs, forming new extractive institutions and stunting growth. Poland, in the same period, built transparent market systems, attracting investment and becoming an Eastern European success story. This shows critical junctures shape long-term national trajectories. 6. From individuals to nations, how institutions shape lives. Institutions don't just affect nations, they shape individual lives. Take Elon Musk. Raised in South Africa under apartheid's extractive policies, which limited opportunities for most. His mother encouraged his tech dreams, and in the US, inclusive institutions, patent protections, and venture capital enabled him to found PayPal, Tesla, and SpaceX. This shows inclusive institutions give individuals the stage to realize their potential. Individuals can also shape institutions. In Brazil, the 2014 car wash anti-corruption probe, driven by citizens and independent judges, exposed state oil company graft, forcing fiscal reforms. This shows ordinary people's oversight can push institutions toward inclusivity. Education bridges individuals and institutions. Singapore, resource poor at its 1965 independence, used universal education to build a skilled workforce, attracting global investment. Education not only boosts personal skills but supports inclusive institutions with talent. In Haiti, low education rates leave citizens unable to engage in public affairs, perpetuating extractive systems. This shows education is key to breaking vicious cycles and building inclusive institutions. Innovation is another driver. Germany's hidden champion firms, like Bosch, thrived under inclusive institutions, with vocational training and patent protections turning small businesses into global supply chain leaders. This shows inclusive institutions turn individual effort into national strength through innovation. Under extractive systems, individuals struggle. In Zimbabwe, post-2000 land seizures crushed farmers' livelihoods, forcing them into informal trading to survive. This reminds us that extractive institutions not only harm economies but strip individuals of dignity and hope. 7. Echoes of history. Lessons from institutional change. Institutional change is an instant. In Britain, the century from the Glorious Revolution to the Industrial Revolution saw gradual reforms. The 1701 Act of Settlement stabilized royal succession, and the 1832 Reform Act expanded voting rights. These incremental changes built a stable, inclusive system. Contrast this with the cost of rapid change. France's 1789 revolution radically dismantled the old aristocracy but led to turmoil and Napoleon's dictatorship. This shows institutional change needs a balance of speed and stability. Too fast or too slow can spell failure. History's echoes resonate in globalization. Inclusive nations like South Korea leveraged global markets for economic takeoff, while extractive ones like Venezuela collapsed under corruption during global shocks. This shows institutions determine a nation's role in globalization. Institutional change also ties to technology. Britain's inclusive institutions enabled the steam engine spread, with factory owners free to invest and workers able to learn. In King China, extractive systems limited technology diffusion, with state-controlled factories run inefficiently by bureaucrats. This shows technology needs inclusive institutions to drive economic growth. 8. The dynamic evolution of institutions, from stability to crisis. Institutions evolve dynamically, and even inclusive ones can erode under internal or external pressures. In the US, 19th-century inclusive institutions fueled industrialization, but the Gilded Age's wealth concentration sparked unrest. Roosevelt's New Deal, with tax reforms and Social Security, rebalanced the system, reinforcing inclusivity. This shows institutions must adapt to new challenges. Extractive systems evolve too. Mexico's early 20th century Porfirio Diaz regime drove growth through extractive means, but land and wealth concentration triggered the 1910 Mexican Revolution. This shows extractive systems may offer short-term stability but are unsustainable long-term. The authors stress that decision-makers must stay vigilant, reforming institutions to avoid crises. Institutions also rely on social contracts. Scandinavian nations like Sweden thrive on high-trust social contracts, with citizens supporting high taxes for public services. Mediterranean nations like Greece, the 2008 financial crisis exposed low trust systems, with tax evasion and corruption weakening governance. Shows social contracts shape institutional stability. Technology poses new challenges. In China, inclusive reforms fueled the rise of Alibaba and Tencent, but data privacy and platform monopolies now test regulators. The authors warn that institutions must evolve with technology to stay inclusive. 9. From history to today, what can we do? What can ordinary people do for institutional reform? The authors offer insights. Inclusive institutions need everyone's involvement. Citizen oversight is crucial. Brazil's car wash movement showed how public and judicial action exposed elite corruption, driving fiscal reform. This reminds us that voting, speaking out, and engaging in public affairs are small but vital steps toward inclusive institutions. Education is the foundation of change. Botswana's success hinged on universal education. Its literacy rate rose from near zero at independence in 1966 to 85% by 2010, enabling economic diversification. Ordinary people can learn and share knowledge to break low trust cycles. Innovation drives inclusive systems. Elon Musk's journey from apartheid South Africa to founding Tesla and SpaceX shows how inclusive institutions empower individual creativity, which in turn advances society. Ordinary people can also contribute through entrepreneurship. India's 1991 reforms opened doors for young entrepreneurs in Bangalore, birthing tech giants like Flipkart. This shows inclusive institutions create platforms for talent, and individual efforts strengthen those systems. 10. Conclusion. Institutions shape the future. Why nations fail teaches us that a nation's rise or fall isn't fated, it's the result of institutional choices. Inclusive institutions unleash human creativity by incentivizing innovation, protecting rights, and offering opportunities. Extractive institutions concentrate wealth and power, stifling potential. From Britain's Industrial Revolution to China's reforms, from Botswana's rise to Korea's divergence, history proves institutions are the decisive force in national destinies. This book not only provides a framework for understanding national success, but also shows us how to act. Whether you're a citizen, entrepreneur, or policymaker, you can contribute to inclusive institutions through oversight, education, and innovation. Your nation's future lies in your hands. Let's draw wisdom from this book to build a fairer, more prosperous world.